Hello, everybody. My name's David Carney. I'm the Executive Director of the Career Industry Council of Australia. Welcome to our special webinar today celebrating 25 years since the formation of CICA. Just before we get underway today, I would just like to make an acknowledgement of country. So the Career Industry Council of Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this webinar on the lands of the Wadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get underway. It runs very similar to our normal webinars, so just to let you know, this session is being recorded. If you experience any technical issues through the course of the session, just please try refreshing your screen in the first instance, or can you just log out and come back in with the link that you've been provided. We will have the chat function open today, but this session will be run very much sort of a conversation style session for you to hear from our past presidents, who I'll introduce to you in a moment. If you do have any questions, time permitting at the end, please feel free to put those in the Q&A and we'll try to get those answered for you. Just a reminder that AI note takers and the use of audio and visual recording equipment, is not permitted through the course of this session. Just some upcoming events. So next week we kick off Global Careers Month. CICA is hosting a webinar next Monday around the topic of supporting refugee resettlement through career development. We'll be welcoming Nancy, Payman, John and Sally to that panel side discussion. That's a free event, so feel free to join us as we kick off Global Careers Month next Monday. And then our final webinar for the International Webinar Series this year will be on Wednesday the 10th. We're welcoming Roberta back to talk about putting professionalism into practice, why we do what we do. So it gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome all of our past presidents, bar one. Martin Smith unfortunately couldn't join us today, so he is an apology. But our past presidents and our current president, Megan Fritsch, back to talk to us today, for them to be able to reflect upon what is a significant achievement, which is 25 years since the formation of CICA. We'll be moving through the different stages of the 25 years, and I've asked each of our presidents to talk about some key times during that time that occurred for them while they were president, and also for CICA. And we're going to start today. I'll introduce them as we go through, but we're going to start today with Judith Leeson, who joins us, Judith Leeson AM, who was CICA's inaugural president. And Judith is going to take us back very, very much to the early days about the formation of CICA, and to let people know what sort of was going on at that time and what sort of a task it was to sort of bring the associations together in what was a world first and continues to be a world first. There is nothing like CICA anywhere else around the world, and it is a testament to the fact that not only has it stood the test of time for 25 years, but is really very much a global leader in the global career development community today. So Judith, welcome. I'm going to start with you, and we might just start by taking you back, Judith, and perhaps talking to us about what sort of inspired right at the very beginning the whole formation of CICA. What was sort of the genesis of bringing all of these associations together under the one umbrella that we were going to call CICA to be a national voice?
Well, I think the climate was right. The foundation work in career development practice had been laid, and there was a real groundswell of enthusiasm for taking career development services for students to a new level and encompassing adults. In the 90s, I won't be able to mention everybody of significance, sadly, otherwise that would be the whole webinar. So, but I'll mention a few key figures. Col McGowan and Mount Mackenzie formed a collaborative writing partnership which gave people the Australian foundations, I think, and both of them were members of NAGCAS and AACC, being the Tertiary Career Development Association and the Australian Association of Career Counsellors. Many people had dual membership. we all went to everybody else's conferences. I think Wendy Patton and Mary McMahon were really already playing a key role in research, and there were others just too numerous to mention who were using career development theory to inform and enhance their practice. At the government level, Elizabeth Mountain was a formidable visionary influence in the Department of Education, Science and Training, and there was a growing awareness of the demand for effective career guidance in schools. Another powerful influence in Australia was Professor Tony Watson of Cambridge University, UK, who was conducting the Australian assessment of career advice and counselling for the OECD, a singular figure in the field of career development globally. The real game, developed in Canada, was introduced to Australia, and slightly later, the blueprint for career development. The National Career Information Service, now lovingly known as My Future, was being established to create an accessible online career exploration platform, initially for young people. There was an amazing sense of energy and optimism, and the department was eager and ready to engage. It was a time of opportunity, and there were many of us who were just prepared to seize the day. The first teleconference about meeting jointly was held in late 1999 to test whether there was some commitment for collaboration. In April 2000, I was elected National President of the Australian Association of Career Counsellors during its AGM at an IAEVG conference in Perth, where amongst the many inspiring international speakers was Professor Brian Hebert, who presented a paper on working in partnership with the emphasis on generous collaboration and selfless cooperation. The conference was attended by most, if not all, of the presidents of national and state-based career associations, and Brian Hebert was persuaded to chair the first informal meeting to strengthen the collective voice of all Australian career practitioners and to speak with one voice, many echoes. So that was the inspiration and the very beginning.
And Judith, can I take you back to probably, it's interesting, isn't it, how technology's changed? You know, that first meeting we had via teleconference, so we couldn't actually see each other. We were all on telephones.
Oh, no. It was
And
tele, not
yes,
visual.
it was no visual at all. Judith, can I take you back to probably those very early days at UTS in Sydney, where we all came together for our first face-to-face meeting? It was on a weekend. We all funded ourselves to get there. What are your memories of that first meeting where we spent sort of a weekend locked away thrashing out the vision and mission of CICA?
Fabulous memories. It was just so exciting to get together. We met at the University of Technology, Sydney, and John Carroll, who was a very well-known career practitioner, I think possibly with a psych background, he facilitated our first meeting. And during that time, there was just this wellspring I experienced of enthusiasm. I think Alan Bevan came and spoke to us briefly from what was to be My Future. But we actually, over 2 days, were able to agree on a name, the Career Industry Consortium of Australia, which we later changed to Council. We developed our vision, our mission, and our objectives. And we took that all back to our respective associations for extensive consultation. I think there was a real congruence there. We wanted to have a peak body we didn't know that we would become the peak body, but we did want to have a go at it. So we agreed to work together, ensuring that each association was able to keep its identity and continue to set its criteria for membership and its specific professional development. I think we became very active in identifying our allies. We linked up with other educational bodies like the Curriculum Corps, and we made new connections with industry bodies and with overseas gurus. In 2001, we were the recipients of a grant from government to coordinate and facilitate the views of career practitioners. So we established a really sound working relationship with the Department of Education, Science and Training in one of its many acronyms. Members of CICA were also presidents of their respective member associations and were responsible to their members. I was national president of AACC for, I think, 5 or 6 terms, one of the larger organisations. It was a time of great demand on our time, but I was self-employed, so I just worked 40 hours a week in our business and 40 hours a week to get CICA underway. I think it was 40, might have been more. I think we all did the same. But we didn't have the benefits of video link-ups. We did everything by telephone and by email. But we did establish there were 1 or 2 little hiccups on the way, but because everyone was so enthused and really selfless in their wish to form CICA, that we were able to come to agreements. And the clue, I think, to our success was that we always went back to our members with everything for their agreement. During my 5-year tenure as I was the initial trustee, the interim and then inaugural president of CICA, we really worked tirelessly to establish a collegial relationship between all member associations and to develop and register our constitution. I remember that CEAV was very instrumental there in getting the constitution underway. And we provided co-design into many major career development projects funded by the government. We also contributed to a huge range of projects and initiatives. The OECD country report, the early platform for My Future with Peter Tatham and Mary McMahon writing the paper Career, Not Just a Job, still a resource for me, I'm happy to say. We worked with Miles Morgan in the co-design of the Australian Blueprint for Career Development. We conducted a national forum for career development practitioners, looking at the big issues of professional standards and national accreditation. We developed guidelines for professional development and equality resources, coordinated scholarships for school career advisors, either released to undertake postgraduate study or internships in industry. And we'll put this in. We also profiled the Judith Leeson Awards for Excellence in Career Counselling at our conferences, with the finalists being awarded with a plaque and some funding for their school. And that was instituted by the Honourable Brenda Nelson, who was the Minister for Education, Training and Youth Affairs. I was selected as a member of the Australian country team, attending an international symposium in Vancouver, Canada, and also in Wellington, New Zealand. And then I stepped down from being AACC president, giving another office bearer the opportunity to become involved in a leadership capacity. I happily supported Peter Tatham as the next CICA president. My involvement in CICA then segued into that of executive officer, and I project managed the development of the professional standards and the International Symposium in Sydney. So
I think
we were all incredibly busy, weren't we?
We were, Judith, and you've covered off a lot of history in that first thing. I think it gives us it's a perfect segue now to probably, as you just mentioned, Peter, to bring Peter into the conversation, because Peter did take over from you as president, and I think in that time, Peter obviously had to pick up the carriage of probably two fairly important bits of documentation. I think the professional standards and obviously the Australian blueprint both today still exist and are integral to the career development profession. So I'll bring you in, Peter, and perhaps ask you to reflect on maybe right at the very start, because I think you were the president at that time when we were talking about establishing the professional standards. And as Judith did say, you were instrumental in writing a piece which underpinned the development of the blueprint as well. So you might share some reflections on those two bits of information.
Well, look, Judith was an absolute dynamo at that time, and I think a wonderful mentor. I think she was provided big shoes to follow. Yeah, it was a tough gig, I think. When Judith mentioned that she was working 40 hours a week, I think these kind of things, they don't get done easily. But the great thing, I think, for us, all of us, it's fantastic to see all these presidents here, was that just the collegiality, I think, and the fantastic nature of the people, and some really talent giants, well, like Col McCowan and some others that you've mentioned, but there were so many, I think, that Judith talked about. So, the question is whether the professional standards shape the profession. I think the proof is in the pudding. 20 years on, like from the start of sort of doing the professional standards, they've become very important, and no longer are we just sort of hoping to be a profession. I think we've made some severe inroads into becoming a profession. I think part of this, we've got more jobs that require minimum qualifications. Private sector providers are sort of increasing, and the universities that provide qualifications now accept the need that they get assessed in relation to the courses. So part of this started with the OECD review, which involved 37 countries, and I was part of the Australian country team that went to the final discussions. And I think one of the things that occurred out of that was that was career development a profession? And the clear answer from the review of those countries was that no, it wasn't. It didn't meet many of the criteria of a professional of professions like accounting or law. So I think that when we came back, there was I think the momentum that was started with Judith and CICA, I think, continued. And I think there was genuine interest by government to continue this idea of actually implementing something for that would lead to some sort of standards for career development, because it was a very mixed bag. Anybody could be a career developer, from Auntie Beryl to Uncle Sam could all be a careers advisor, and some of them thought they were better than many of the professionals in the field. So the idea of actually sort of creating a requirement to have a qualification, and in fact, lots of career development practitioners didn't want to get a qualification. They thought that they'd picked up enough experience. So we've moved along a bit from that. I think that so standards differentiated us and created an opportunity for people to enter field, and one of the most wonderful careers that anybody could take up. So you have to remember the reason why the OECD was interested at all in career development. It wasn't just for the psychological issues or all of the other aspects of personality assessment and all of that. It was economic. So there was because they saw career guidance to be a catalyst for implementation of government policies, particularly in three ways: to improve the efficiency of education systems and the labour market, to contribute to social equity, and assist with the challenges arising out of lifelong learning and active labour market policies. And I think that's still the same today. And we're still not quite there, but we've got a maelstrom of other events that are impacting on career development. So, what goes around comes around, and I think it's just as important. So these challenges remain. And I think there's we received significant funding to develop the standards, both in Judith's time and in mine. We got additional funding for each part of the work that we provided. We had good people like Carol Locke and Robin Bergen, these bureaucrats that cared about career development, and assistant secretary levels who also cared about career development. So we were very grateful for that. And the associations also had some problems in coming on board because they had their own agendas. So CICA was able to sort of meld and get some people, get the association together. And the result was, some 6 years later, by the way, under Bernadette and Mike's time, we reached an end goal. I'm sure they'll talk about that. Regarding the blueprint, well, it was a terrific concept, and it was done under the Makicha model organisation. I'm not sure how well it's actually worked over time, but the aim at the time was that it would become another quality instrument. You would set some standards around the Australian, about the blueprint that would assist providers to sort of work within some guidelines. So from that perspective, it worked. But whether it's been taken up nationally right now, I'd say it's still mixed.
I think, Peter, one of the things that I reflected upon in my time on CICA and working with you and going to a number of your presentations was when you spoke about the train coming in and the train going out as far as career policy and government interest. I think it would be fair to say that we're now in a period where it's more difficult at a time when it shouldn't be. You use the train, I use the roller coaster. I think, we were at the top of the roller coaster with the NCI. We've now come sliding down to the bottom again, and we now need to work our way back up again. What's some of your, what were some of the challenges that you faced during your time as president about maintaining that interest in sort of careers policy at a government level?
It's a battle. It's a tough battle, because when the train is in, you're listened to, you're heard, you're invited to things. And as you see that, like I remember Tony Greer saying to me on the way back from the OECD review, saying, well, Peter, the train's in, but the train can go out. And he was fairly nonchalant about that. He just saw that as just another agenda item. It didn't matter so much to him over the time, another policy issue will come up. And it's an even more crowded policy agenda now. So the resources available are often less, and the requirements and getting access to the people who can say yes has become is difficult. But it was certainly difficult then. You could almost see the bureaucrat that was against what we were trying to do. As you talk to them, their head would go like that, and you knew that the answer was no. And like, there were great people in the federal government, but there were some terrible people that you would sort of never invite for dinner, I tell you. So it's, but you have to be professional about it and talk to them. I think that Brendan Nelson, when Judith was around, she had a good relationship with him. I had a good relationship with Julie Bishop. So she invited me to be a member of an advisory group on youth and career transitions. And it was a bit of a powerhouse for a while, but still, and she also funded the 2006 symposium in Sydney. So she was still interested, but she wasn't as interested as Brendan. And I think she certainly was interested in Julie Bishop. So it was, but anyway, it's as it goes. Look, I think these things do come around. You've got now some 2,000 people who have access to Parliament House any day of the week. You've got 700 or 800 lobby groups. You've got a very small number of people working in CICA. You, David, and one or two others from time to time. So it is a difficult gig to get the entrance point and get listened to. I think politicians and bureaucrats are a little bit more tentative these days. But in my time, there were the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I think overall what we were doing was fairly positive, and I think we consulted with government pretty well. They were certainly remain committed to the standards. And I think doing things like the International Symposium in 2006 was a way of actually focusing on some opportunities that we were part of a world group, not just a national group. And we did get some ongoing commitment as a result of that. You know, we gained access to groups like ACARA and Skills Australia, and I think that was helpful too. But I think we need a sort of, it's time, I think, to have a little bit more momentum from some of those international bodies as well, like the OECD again.
Thank you, Peter. I might bring Mike in now, Mike Jeeves, who I think, you know, Mike, we speak about phases of CICA and different phases, and I think one of the things that Mike, I think you took on during your time as presidency. Clearly, we had some government contracts, and there were lots of, you know, as Peter and Judith have articulated, we did get some money from government to really establish some really foundational things. But I think, Mike, during your presidency, there was an opportunity for us to take what we were doing sort of from a policy level and from an internal industry level and expand that out to show the wider public about what is this thing called career development and why career guidance and career information and career education is important. And that was with the launch of the first National Career Development Week. And the government funded that. They were times when there was quite a bit of money around. And I'm sure you remember those days, Mike, where there was, you know, it was a 3-year program, and they were the days when we had National Career Development Week banners flying up and down the highways in Canberra leading up to Parliament House. We were giving away T-shirts and tote bags, and Karen Penrose was sending stuff out everywhere, and we had videos going everywhere. I might ask you just to reflect on that during your leadership, sort of about how do you think that particular campaign worked to raise public awareness of this thing that we call career development?
I think largely it was actually through its impact in the broader education sectors, schooling, tertiary and higher education, because they really took it on in significant ways. It was a bit patchy in some areas, but by and large, certainly in New South Wales, which of course I operated in the education sector, the compulsory secondary area here, and it actually exposed parents and wider extended connected adults and so on to the issues of career development and the benefits that can happen for their own child. But also because we were operating now within a framework of recognising we were part of a much broader group of career practitioners, including private practitioners, it actually raised possibilities for the adults that were connected to those children as well. So I think in that sense, the National Career Development Week actually certainly sort of expanded through those quarters the idea of career development and career counselling and so on as being a very powerful thing. I reflected on the issue in terms of my own experience of it and many of my colleagues in New South Wales, because since the mid-70s, they'd had full-time careers advisors in government high schools. And what was interesting is that very rarely would a careers advisor be the person that would get the accolades for the ongoing positive career development that many of the students might actually experience. And yet they may have been the precipitating cause that led the student to eventually have that positive outcome. And one of the things in schools, of course, is that students talk to the person that they feel the most comfortable with, and therefore it's the person they have the most contact with often through their school subjects. So one of the important things that I think a lot of the careers advisors in New South Wales started to realise, they needed to use that network to actually keep the message going as well, so that often it would be a colleague, a subject teacher, who would actually be parroting the very things that you would be saying and you may well have done at least once or twice or more to the student, but it would be them that the student would remember because they were much more focused in their life. And I thought, well, that's fine. That was a good thing. And I think many of the careers advisors in New South Wales particularly, the thing that also enhanced them to actually and empowered them to actually do that was the fact that the standards came in. And all of a sudden, they were a profession because there were standards. There were some other factors. The National Career Development Week even played into that as well. and so the blueprint equally. And schools started to adopt the blueprint as the model. And so when they were advertising, particularly in the non-government sector, for someone to come and do careers, they would use the blueprint as a sort of a guideline of the sorts of things they were hopeful the person would bring in terms of skilling and knowledge to actually do. So it was very, very powerful in that respect, I think. And I think that was possibly true. The fact that we operated well, I remember referring people, parents on to career practitioners who worked in the private area because they were keen to sort of do something for themselves, and even had occasion where parents would come to talk to me and I would then pass them on and so on. So, and National Career Development raised the profile broadly across those sectors. And I suspect beyond that as well, but certainly from my own experience, I've got to talk about it as through the education sectors.
Mm. And I think it was an interesting time too, wasn't it, Mike? Because again, like we said with Judith, where we were doing teleconferences, this type of medium didn't exist during National Career Development Week. It was very traditional, hard copy everything, not many digital resources. Right. I think we had a few videos, which I don't even think YouTube was widely used at that time. So we had to sort of, spread those videos out. And I think the interesting thing is too, I think, when CICA decided to reactivate what's now called National Careers Week, because we saw those benefits, I think, that National Career Development Week achieved, not only for CICA, but also raising the awareness publicly about the role of career development. And I think where we sit today, and Megan may talk about this when she talks, but I think, National Careers Week today, I think in the advent of these types of mediums being able to be run online, National Careers Week now is a big winner for CICA around visibility and visibility beyond our own cohort of career practitioners. We have industry fully engaged in running events during National Careers Week and the benefits they see of careers and career development. So the other thing I'd pick up on, Mike, during your time, my memory of this, because I think I might have been the treasurer of CICA at the time, I'm not sure, but I think you also had the difficult task, I think, towards the latter end of your presidency when, we spoke about Peter talking about the train coming in and the train going out. I think the latter part of your presidency, the train was heading out big time. And a lot of those contracts were winding up and there was no sign of any type of new contracts coming CICA's way. What's your reflection on that period of time, the challenges that CICA faced?
Yeah, look, I think to some extent I was a little bit unaware of the reality of that's where we were moving at the time, because there was so much happening within the context of CICA and the professional bodies that formed it in terms of the standards and so on, and even National Career Development Week, that really sort of consumed a bit more of my focus, I think. And I guess it was, look, I think, as Peter more than indicated, we have to be realistic. Politicians some may be deeply concerned about some things, but in the end, they're practical about staying in the position to be actually able to achieve government and do government and all that sort of stuff. And that's the reality. So, and of course, we're just one competing voice against all the others. And I guess in a sense, I kind of already knew that. And so wasn't particularly getting too anxious about it myself. I think the issue was whether or not career development. Now, when I stepped down from being president, I think National Career Development was still sort of happening. And so it was sort of, for me, a little bit still a sort of riding at the top of the roller coaster rather than at the bottom. And I think it was really my successor who had to then really deal with the realities of the change in the political climate than me. So yeah, I think that's the best I can say for that.
It might be a good segue to bring Bernadette into the conversation now. I think during Bernadette's presidency, we might get onto some of those challenges, but I think I think one of the great things which Bernadette, I might ask you to reflect upon. I think very early on in your presidency, you were the president at the time when the professional standards officially came into being, because there was a long lead-in period to those professional standards, and that was the official launch of the professional standards at Parliament House from memory. Do you want to reflect on the importance, I think, of getting us to that point, and then probably thinking about, I think Peter's reflected on, what they've meant to the profession. I'd be interested for you to reflect on, what you think they've meant to the profession as well.
Well, it was an absolute turning point for all the associations in 2012, because we'd been working consistently for 6 years to try and get all the members to a level of, professional entry level into the profession as such, using the CICA standards. I reflect back now because I think that often in the early days before the standards came into being, we really didn't have a framework to work to. We were, as Mike was saying, whoever was appointed in the school at the time, or whoever was out in the field with some sort of psychology background, could then also call themselves a career practitioner. The standards gave us that framework. And when we actually had the document, a hard copy document, I've still got the original nicely signed with all the autographs, Minister Garrett as well, who was Minister for Education at the time. It really came home that what we had achieved. And a huge thank you to Dr. Mary McMahon, because she was the driving force, and Peter Tatham as well, who actually mentored most of the presidents afterwards. He was fantastic in allowing us to follow through on many of the policies that CICA had actually had input into by then. That was 2012. So we'd been going for a good 12 years. I think that one of the things that I really reflected on is that each of the presidents, irrespective of what the political agendas were doing at the time, none of us actually lost focus. We were incredibly committed. And I think that came from Judith, the commitment to see through these standards right through to 2012. And I remember lots of activity at our local level at the CEAV, and we were constantly introducing the standards in lots of different ways. So I reflect now on the fact that professional development really had a focus for us. And so many of the associations then got on board with increasing the amount of professional development they were offering around the standards, so that people were up to date and aware and could understand what we were trying to do. So when we went off to Canberra to have that, to hand over the standards, that fabulous little orange booklet, which was really unique. And may I add, that was the first set of professional standards as such that had international recognition as well, even back then in 2012. It was seen as a milestone for the profession. So off we went, handed over those standards, and then we were all tasked with making sure that our associations were up to speed, that we actually had our members at those levels. So we had professional members, we had entry level at the Certificate 4, and we were able to have a really broad church. So we were very inclusive. That's one thing that CICA really should be acknowledged for, the fact that we included. We didn't exclude into the career development profession. We were looking to upskill all the time. So we brought our members along with us, and that wasn't easy, particularly in the downturn when the government wasn't talking about career development as an essential component of all the education systems, not just secondary education, but also at the TAFE level and at the university level. And at the time that we were bringing in the standards, the universities were closing down some of their career services. So it really was turbulent times from around about 2010 to 2014. But we stuck through it, and that was because we had this really solid grounding that as a united force, one voice, many echoes, we would continue to make improvements in the industry. And I think the associations really came on board. Each of those associations that make up CICA should be congratulated, because they took the standards, they embraced them, and then they interpreted them for their sector, and grew the CICA associations in lots of different ways. And the other thing that the standards actually gave us, once we were united in that way, was a common language, which we hadn't had before. So suddenly all the associations were using the same language. So we knew what a career practitioner was, and we weren't shy in telling our education departments what it meant. Certainly here in Victoria, we weren't shy. We had lots of conversations with the education department, and congratulations to them, because they listened and in some ways set the agenda for change. And in 2010, with the blueprint that had come out. The very first iteration of the blueprint wasn't an easy document to understand, but we were, as associations, able to take that document, unpack it, and educate our own education departments on how to interpret the documents within an educational setting. And I know that at the state levels, in Michael, remember this, our state departments were really quite proactive, and they did work with us to try and bring those standards in. And I remember having a little dance around the office when the first position description I ever read here in Victoria that required a professional standard qualification for a career development practitioner, we were absolutely stoked, and I think we had arrived. And that was done in very, very turbulent times when the conversations were fractured. And we had I think it was a Labor government at the time, yes it was, because Minister Garrett was there, who were not very sympathetic to state-based associations, but they were quite sympathetic to the education departments in each state, and required them to come up with their own national career development standards. So, and of course, each state is going to interpret that differently. So we saw different types of responses, but to a national agenda around career development practice in different education settings. And I think that through Miles Morgan, we started to see some new quality resources coming through, but then CICA itself started to talk about the requirements for benchmarking and started to develop the new benchmarks for schools. And so that was all part of that particular consolidation, but it was at the centre of all of that with standards.
I think, Bernadette, just to sort of finish up on here, I think, each president brings, I think, an area close to their heart to the table during their time as president. And when I reflect upon your time as president, I think, not to say that we weren't focused on that, but I think you definitely sharpened CICA's focus on the role that career development played for people with a disability and around social inclusion.
Yes.
And equity. And do you want to just talk about that? Because I think you were quite instrumental, and I think CICA has continued that baton today. We're very strong in that space, yes. And I think that's all credit to you. So did you just want to reflect quickly on that?
I think what we do, we really acknowledged both once the professional standards came out, that there was this massive gap around a conversation around career development for young people with disabilities, irrespective of what level of education they were at. And we really sharpened our knowledge of that. And what we started to do was to work with disability experts, disability associations, and of course on CICA at the time we had the rehabilitation services that were part of the membership. And we just felt that they needed a stronger voice, that we needed to actually talk about what is this career development, which is really around access and equity, right, to all aspects of work and working life, irrespective of the individual's background. And later on, we started to look at the concept of Indigenous career development as well. So that was something that was very strong and dear to my heart as well towards the end, when before I retired, that I really felt that was another significant gap. From that work that we did around disability actually came a set of benchmarks and guidelines for working with young people with disabilities. They're very effective, and I do know and I understand that was the basis for some work that the state associations worked on themselves to try and get guidelines around what is quality practice for young people with disabilities and their career development. So I came up with some really top-notch, and I think that paper, I can't remember the title of it, Dave, maybe you can, but it was on the CICA list of resources, and I do know that we referred to it extensively when we were developing our courses as well.
And it's still there, and even though it is probably a decade old now, it is still referred to by disability organisations, do refer to it and do use it. So it is a document that has stood the test of time.
Yeah.
So thank you for that, Bernadette. We now bring in Megan Fritsch, who's our current president. And she doesn't like me saying this, but she's actually currently the longest serving president of CICA. Megan, I think I suppose you would also say that we've been, I think that where we find ourselves today as an organisation is a testament to all of the presidents that have gone before you, that have done, as we've heard today, some significantly heavy lifting in some very challenging times that have set the amazing groundwork for where we are as an organisation today. I think each of them have touched upon, I think, Peter's analogy about the train, where when the train's in, you are contacted, people are talking to you. I think, I'm sure you're going to reflect upon that is very much the case today, even though we are experiencing a period of time at the moment with the closure of the National Careers Institute, a lack of direction around careers policy at a national level. We are still being contacted and we are still being asked our views on things. And not only are we just being contacted by government, but we are also being contacted by national industry associations, people that are now playing in our space and so forth. I might just start by asking you to reflect upon, I'm sure most of our attendees today, would be familiar with the National Careers Institute, which existed. I might ask you to reflect upon sort of thinking about how CICA positioned itself to sort of influence the establishment of the Institute.
Yeah, thanks, David. And probably before I begin, I just want to say I am sitting on the shoulders of giants, and all of those giants have joined us today. And I'm very appreciative of all the work that they have done over the last, I'll just say 25 years. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be in the position that I'm in. So thank you to each and every one of you. I think just in regards to your question, obviously the closure of the National Careers Institute has really created a significant gap, but also an opportunity. Now, the gap obviously is in, that coordinated national leadership. But I think there's a powerful opportunity for CICA to really step forward and to ensure that career development really remains firmly at the centre of Australia's education, skills and workforce agendas. Obviously, career development, in all of our eyes, we believe that it needs to be seen as a vital national infrastructure, just as important as things like transport, digital, or our health systems, because, we all know it connects people with opportunity and it helps really reform and translate, into real world outcomes. That's how important it really is. In regards to CICA is actively influencing the policy landscape by engaging with government departments. We are contributing to the Productivity Commission's inquiry into building a skilled and adaptable workforce. We're providing evidence into inquiries on student pathways, women's participation and workforce reform. So we've really made it clear that reforms in education and training will only succeed when Australians are supported to understand and navigate and act on the opportunities presented to them. So even though there is, that gap with the National Careers Institute, we are still working extremely hard in all of those areas. I guess across every document that we have produced, the message is consistent that investment in skills will only deliver its full potential when it's underpinned by really significant quality career education and professional guidance. So our role as the national peak body is to ensure that career development is embedded, I guess, across all our policy reforms. We have to make sure it's from that really early phase of early education, and it's really that lifelong learning and recognised, I guess, as an essential infrastructure that underpins productivity, equity and well-being for all Australians. So I think one thing that I'd like to share, obviously, and it's really important, that CICA's vision and mission, we have recently refreshed those two areas and have now published that on the CICA website. Again, they clearly articulate our ongoing commitment to leading equitable and future-focused career development that, empowers Australians and it supports life transitions and it needs to enhance well-being and it drives national productivity. So these type of statements really reaffirm who we are and what we stand for and, most importantly, the vital role that we play in shaping Australia's future workforce.
just while you're talking on the vision and the mission, Megan, I think we've spoken about today about the professional standards extensively. I think all of our past presidents have touched on the professional standards. Perhaps did you want to bring our attendees up to date with what's happening with the professional standards in 2026?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of our professional standards, we did have a partnership with the National Careers Institute. And I mean, that was a defining moment for Australia's career development system. But I guess, in terms of where we're up to with our professional careers, sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
I'll help you. So
Yeah.
Perhaps just to let people know that we have obviously undertaken over the last 6 months a review of our professional standards in light of digital tools and AI. And we've used obviously the CICA member associations, so practitioners from those organisations to assist us in that review, as well as some of our global partners as well. Just sort of as an opportunity to let people know when we're likely to see that next year.
Yeah, so obviously we are working and have worked heavily on that, and we're looking towards having that available for everyone early next year. Obviously, it's a significant piece of work that we have carried out across our member associations, but more importantly across our, committee that we've got here with CICA. So we're looking at in terms of having it out early next year.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I put you on the spot.
Yeah,
I
you
forgot.
did.
And probably just finishing, Megan, before we bring everybody else back in, where do you sort of see, what's your vision for CICA for the next 25 years? Where do you sort of see us as an organisation moving forward? I think you've touched on it today. I think you've spoken about it, the ongoing role. But I think, if we reflect upon the 25 years and where we've come from, I think if we reflect on, go back to 1999, Judith, that meeting in Perth, the meeting at UTS, and where we are today. I mean, I think some of those people from those early days may be shocked to sort of see where CICA, is today. But I think, as an organisation, and you might want to touch on this, but, I also think that, globally now, it's not a case of us having to reach out to sort of international global partners, that we are included in that. I think Global Careers Month is a example of that, run by, an interagency group made up of not only the OECD, but the ILO and the World Bank and CETAFOP and so forth. And CICA, was identified and has been identified as a key organisation to coordinate the Oceania region for Global Careers Month. So it's sort of a little bit future focused. I won't hold you to it.
No.
But where do you sort of see the vision moving forward?
Yeah, I guess looking into the future and having a little bit of opportunity to reflect on this, I guess my vision for CICA is to really continue to be that trusted, independent voice that leads the advancement of career development of our profession. And it's a profession that we want, to be visible, which it is. And we want it to be valued, and we want it to be a vital, profession to Australia's social and economic prosperity. We want every Australian, regardless of their background, location, or even their stage of life, to have access to professional, high-quality career support. And we want that delivered by practitioners who meet our professional standards. I reflect on, that whole professional standards space and back in 2012, and I remember how important and significant that was. And they are just such an important element of our whole profession. This is our central to our call for universal entitlement to career guidance. We want it embedded across education, training, and all our workforce systems. CICA also continues to advocate for the re-establishment of a national coordinating body to drive innovation, quality, and long-term policy alignment. So I would really like that, to come to fruition. As you touched on, and I mentioned in early 2026, the updated version of the professional standards and our Australian career development practitioners along with that revised edition of our guiding principles. That's coming out. These updates will ensure that our standards and our principles reflect, I guess, that contemporary practice. And we want to be responding to digital transformation. And I guess the other really important element is we want to make sure we are upholding the highest levels of ethical and professional integrity. I think too, David, I know we're getting close to the end of our session, but I want to take this opportunity to really thank our grassroots members of the CICA member associations. A lot of them contribute their time, they contribute their insight, their expertise as part of working groups. And, they're part of leading this important review. So their professionalism and their commitment to our shared purpose really exemplifies the strength of our national community and the collaborative spirit that defines CICA. And I'm really proud of that. Obviously, like I said, I've stood on the shoulders of these wonderful and amazing experts that sit with us today. But really, it's a collaborative effort. In the next 25 years, we'll see that technology and artificial intelligence is going to reshape our work. It already is. But we need that human guidance, we need that empathy, we need ethics, and we need that connection to really remain at the heart of having excellent and effective career development. So our vision is a system that embraces digital innovation, but we also need to make sure that we maintain equitable, human-centered services for everyone. So touching on what Bernadette said in regards to inclusivity, I think our future must be inclusive. Career development has the power to break down gender stereotypes. We have the opportunity to expand and ensure that all Australians, women, men, migrants, First Nations peoples, and all those in our regional and rural and remote areas, can see a place for themselves in the changing world of work. And I think if we achieve this, then we will gather again, hopefully in 25 years, and we celebrate CICA's 50th anniversary, that we will not just be, commemorating on our longevity, but we will actually be celebrating as a nation that truly understands and values career development, as the foundation for a fair, skilled and prosperous Australia.
Great way to finish, Megan. You should be a politician, I think.
No, I forget questions, David.
You're a busy, busy person. It's all right, like all of us. Look, I think we are running close to time. I think, just to sort of close out, I just really want to thank all of our past presidents and Megan for taking the time to come today. It has been great to reunite our leaders over the time. I think that 25 years for an organisation like CICA, where you bring a group of associations with their own visions and their own missions and their own agendas together, and be able for all of those organisations to stay together because deep down they all understand what the cause actually is, has not only been a testament to CICA, but also to the member associations, and as Megan said, as to their members. So to Judith and to Peter, to Mike and to Bernadette and to Megan, thank you very much for giving of your time today. It's been a wonderful session for us to be able to reflect. We will put it up on the CICA YouTube channel so that it will sort of sit there for people to obviously reflect upon and to be able to read, if they haven't had an opportunity to join us today. It's been great to have you all back. I think before we started the webinar today, I think that the five of them have not actually seen each other for some time, so it was a reunion amongst presidents as well, which was sort of quite nice. So I think Judith might have just disconnected, but thank you again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We hope you found it interesting. It gave you a bit more background on CICA and who CICA was and where CICA came from. And I think, as Megan said, there is a lot of work to continue to be done. To use Peter's analogy of the train, being in and going out, I think, Megan's vision is that that train is always in, moving forward. But sort of where we sit at the moment, obviously, unfortunately we still do have the train in and the train out. But I think we are, I think on CICA, we are all very focused on, trying to capitalise. And I think over the time, when the train does go out, I think some of the years have been more difficult than others. I think that we are very committed to, even though the train may be out at the moment, that we do still have good connections, not only with government, but also with some of our other partners, to be able to put careers policy and career development back on the agenda sooner rather than later. So again, thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. To our attendees, thank you for taking the time. Have a wonderful afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you. Good luck.